All right, I can see our folks joining slowly. Welcome, everyone. My name is Saran Sidime. I am PPIA's Communications and Outreach Manager. I'm so excited to welcome all of you to our USAJOBS workshop with folks from the GAO, the how-to and best practices. And I'm just going to quickly talk a little bit about PPIA, and then I'm going to hand over the mic to Michelle Wong, who's with us today, to introduce our other panelists. But for those of you who are not familiar, the Public Policy and International Affairs Program, PPIA, is a nonprofit organization that is supporting efforts to increase diversity in graduate studies in public policy and international affairs, and has been doing so for over 40 years. PPIA believes that our democracy will be stronger, less polarized, and more trustworthy when we ensure those entering public service are more representative, compassionate, and inclusive of American identities and global experiences, like a lot of you joining us today. We are gathering for this webinar to go ahead and offer some tips for those of you interested in careers in federal service, thinking about applying to jobs in federal service. And I'm going to go ahead now and introduce Michelle Wong. Michelle Wong serves as a senior analyst on the Natural Resources and Environment team at the U.S. Government Accountability Office, GAO. Throughout her 13-year career at the GAO, she's worked on a range of issues and most recently led teams reviewing enforcement of federal environmental laws and COVID relief to tribes and indigenous people. As an adjunct faculty member with GAO's Learning Center, Michelle helps train colleagues in technical audit skills and issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. In 2019, Michelle became the first GAO recipient of the Elmer B. Stats Award, given by the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, for co-authoring its Best Journal article over the previous 3 calendar years. Thank you so much for being with us, Michelle. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and our panelists.
Thank you so much. And I am so happy to be here with my colleagues. I actually participated in my Junior Summer Institute at Berkeley 20 years ago this summer. And it was there that I first learned about the GAO. Our cohort went to visit the GAO office in San Francisco at the time. And we learned about GAO and what we do. And I sort of filed it away in the back of my head so that when I went to graduate school, eventually I participated with the internship program as a graduate student and then came back full time and have been here ever since. But I want to make sure that I get to introduce my esteemed colleagues before we launch into what we hope is a very useful webinar for you to answer some questions you might have, to demystify the process. Applying for federal positions is sort of an art and a skill, and we hope to make sure that that is not the barrier preventing all of you from serving. Celia, you want to go first? Oh, you're muted.
Man. Hi, everyone. My name is Celia Sawyerr, and I'm currently an analyst on the Contract and National Security Acquisitions team here at GAO. I did my GSI in 2015 at the Ford School at the University of Michigan. And I actually went to University of Michigan for my graduate program where I actually learned about GAO, interned, and then came full time. Been really happy with my experience and went to things like this. So for those who are here and who are going to be watching the recording, you're doing a great first step into learning, like moving forward in your career. So yep, I can go ahead.
Cristina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cristina. I'm also an analyst here at GAO, currently placed in the physical infrastructure team. I interned with GAO in summer 2022 with the Homeland Security and Justice team. And I went immediately after graduating from Rutgers University with my MPP. And then right prior to that, during undergrad, I did my JSI at the University of Minnesota. So happy to see you all today and help answer any questions you may have.
Great, thanks so much. So before we launch into the meat of this presentation, I just wanted to get a show of virtual hands for folks who have some familiarity with USAJOBS. This will give us a sense for where we need to meet you. So if you could raise your virtual hand to let us know if you have some familiarity with USAJOBS. Otherwise, we will assume that we are starting from scratch. Excellent. I'm seeing a good mix here. So it looks like we have some folks who are probably newer to USAJOBS, some folks who might have explored it or used it to apply for positions in the past. So that's good to know. The first time I used USAJOBS, I was already at GAO at the time, actually. So I'm glad you're all getting an early introduction of this. One of the reasons why we get so excited about presenting this specific material to PPIA folks is because historically, there's not always been sort of an insider scoop, insider knowledge pipeline to federal service from underserved communities. And so we want to make sure that we are, again, demystifying that process. It really shouldn't be a process that holds folks back from bringing your skills to federal service. So we wanted to just jump in right now and kick off with sort of where to even begin. Celia, I will pass it to you.
Perfect. Thank you. So where do you start? So as we see on the screen, you want to find a job announcement that interests you. You can do that by searching on USAJOBS or even going to the agency website that you're interested in, and they may even have like listings there. One of the most important things is like having your resume ready, whether that's a federal resume or a personal one. And the main difference between those two is like the way it's formatted and kind of what information's in there. And we can talk about that later, or even answer any questions about that. Having responses to some assessment questions, depending on the job, they might have assessment questions related to that, and any other required documents specific to the job. So I would go into the USAJOBS and like make a checklist of what you would need beforehand, and that would save you time when you're ready to go applying for like one job or even multiple jobs at the same time. But yeah, so that I would definitely recommend going in and seeing ahead of time to make sure you have all of those packages, all those application package components ready to go. And go to the next slide. And so if you like, so here's a sample of what a job announcement looks like. So at the top, you can see the name of the job announcements. In this sample, it's a student trainee for the management program analyst for GAO. And then it's underneath it, you can see a toolbar and there's different tabs. So that includes the duties, the requirements, documents, how to apply, the overview, and then even your eligibility and location. So as you can see on this slide, the overview section and the eligibility section is circled because it's really important to know when an announcement is opening and when it's closed. So the due date of the job. And also if you're even eligible for it. So for example, this one says student. So you know that this job is only open to students. They may have other descriptions. So this is also really important to know beforehand. So you know that you know what job you're preparing your application package for. So again, I would definitely focus on the opening, closing dates, and the eligibility. When I was going through this, I made sure again to familiarize myself beforehand, so it wasn't a surprise when I was ready to actually apply for the job. And that way it gave me time to actually put a good package together, and all I had to do is submit or input everything that I needed at the time. And so here are some really good tips and kind of repeating what I said before, but are you eligible for this position? Do you have the required experience and or education to apply? Do you have the required resume type? That can be the federal or the personal. And of course, did you check the due date and any submission limits? That's very, very important. So these are just really good tips to really think about when you're reading the announcement, just so you know that you're not making an application in vain. You have everything that you need and that you're ready to go when you're ready to submit.
And if I might jump in here too, I would encourage you to look at job announcements even before you've decided to apply for a specific position. This will help you just familiarize yourself with the jargon and the vocabulary terminology that may be used at different agencies, because you might have the same title at one agency as you would another, but the job descriptions read differently. So just start getting into your head the kind of skills, knowledge, abilities, and things that federal agencies seek.
Great point, thank you. And so for those who have gone into GAO and those who have gone into the USAJOBS and those who haven't, there is this really great filter section where you can filter the job that you want to see based on the agency that you're interested in, the eligibility, students, recent graduates, as an example, hiring authority, the location, and then even the GS or grade level, or basically the payment scale. So I would highly encourage using that because it helps. I mean, USAJOBS can be seen like a black hole of just information and jobs, and it can be it's a lot. It can be very overwhelming. So using those filters that apply to you would very much help see things that are actually relevant to you. I definitely used the agency filter when I was going through, definitely the students and recent graduates, that's where I was in that stage of life, plus what I was eligible for, the location, and also just the grade level, just to play around with, okay, well, like how much could I make in this position, or what's the cap, what's the minimum? So I would definitely encourage using it. If you're the type of person who just wants to see everything, then don't worry about it. But if you are someone who wants to like, okay, well, how can I use my time even more wisely just to make sure that I'm seeing what I can actually apply for, I would definitely use the filters.
Yeah, and to stem off of what I had mentioned, and I say this knowing that my title includes the word analyst, but analyst can mean a lot of different things. And so again, if you are familiar with what job descriptions look like across different agencies, you might be able to do a more effective keyword search on positions that might actually align with your interests. So you may be someone who is interested in public finance. There are public finance positions across the federal government, and there may be opportunities at agencies that you might have never heard of before. So, I wouldn't restrict it necessarily to the agencies that come up to the top of your head, but you can really have some helpful keyword searches here if you know what you're looking for.
So another tip that we have here is creating job searches and even having like notification emails. So in USAJOBS, you can say up to 10 job searches. You can, again, use those filters, name your search, and then set up those notifications. So the way I did this when I was applying for my internship role at GAO, I went ahead and looked at the jobs that I was eligible for, but also beforehand, like before it was even, when I first learned about GAO, I wanted to just make sure I was getting email notifications of when things were popping up, when deadlines, when the jobs that I was eligible for was ready to be applied, like where I was ready to apply for them, and just make sure I was up to date and that I wasn't forgetting anything, or I had a lot of things happening or going on as a student. So these email notifications were really, really helpful. And all of this, hinges upon starting early and making sure you go in and, again, familiarizing yourself and with titles, and just making sure that, you're setting yourself up to succeed. So this is another tip to help you do that on your journey to apply for any federal job. And then lastly, for this section though, for using USAJOBS, you want to create your account and your profile. And you can use this, once you create your account and your profile, you can use this for any federal job that you're applying for. Again, going in, doing that early. And I know that's like a broken record, but this is very important, especially with the platform that is USAJOBS and how clunky it can be. But going ahead and making sure that you have all the basics that will be sent to any job you apply to is really, really helpful. So when it's actually time to apply, you're able to just submit the required documents per job. And that way you don't have to worry about all of the basics and having to do that at the same time. In this way, this also allows you to save searches and keep track of everything all the hard work and searching that you've done in one area. So yeah, so again, starting early is really, really important. And making this account in your profile ahead of time is really, really helpful.
Great, thanks, Celia. And so as you mentioned, she provided an overview of all the things you can do before you even know what position you might want to apply for. So can't emphasize that enough. I will continue the broken record. can never start too early with starting that account and setting up that profile. Where I'm going to shift to some tips for actually applying for positions. And I will, there was a question in the chat about what hiring authority means in USAJOBS, and I'll get to that in a moment. The crux of your application will likely be the federal resume. Now, there'll be different opportunities to either upload a resume, or you can do what's referred to as build one in the system. And I will tell you that when you build a resume in the USAJOBS system, it's tedious, it's kind of clunky. This is not really known for being a user-friendly system. However, there are certain questions that the Federal Resume Builder will ask of you for entering in information that you may not typically have on a resume that you would use elsewhere. And so one word of caution is that if, for example, there is a minimum requirement for a position that you have worked a particular type of job or have a particular amount of experience, in the build in the system route, there are questions about how many hours you worked per week. That's just not typically something you have on a resume anywhere else. So just keep in mind that if you build something in the system, it will not look pretty, but at least it will have all the information required in terms of completeness for you to move on to the next stage of review. So I say that because even at GAO, we do technically accept uploaded resumes, but if you're missing information, you may inadvertently deem yourself ineligible for a position because you're just missing information that's required. So when you are thinking about your federal resume, there are a few things that make this unique from other types of resumes you may have developed in your careers. The first thing I will tell everyone is forget the whole one side of one page rule. With a federal resume, we've gotten resumes that are pages long, and that is okay, because with the federal resume, what you really want to do is present all of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you bring to a particular position. This is when you go back to that job description. There will always be a section in the job description on USAJOBS that has the knowledge, skills, and abilities sought for this position. Think of it as a checklist. So that checklist of everything that the federal agency says, this is what we hope to see in a successful candidate. This is what we hope that you bring to your application. They are literally telling you this is what we're looking for. And so make sure that you demonstrate that somewhere on your resume. This is your time to show them that you are qualified for this position. It is not time to be humble. It is not time to say, oh, I'm not sure if this was really relevant. If it's in some way relevant, make the relevancy clear and put it on there. This is also sort of the document by which federal agencies will check if, later when you're doing your written assessment or any kind of writing sample or any kind of written prompt, they're going to look at your resume to make sure everything you mentioned in your writing sample aligns with something that happened in your resume. So this is going to be the backbone of your federal application. And this, I just want to point out in this last bullet, it says be searchable. And that goes back to this idea that in that list of knowledge, skills, and abilities, there are going to be very specific terms, skills. This is not the time to pull out the synonyms or thesaurus in Word. This is the time to say, you want data analysis skills? I have data analysis skills. You want experience using R? I have R. So just make it as clear as possible that what you are bringing to the table is what they're looking for. Don't try to be creative about it. Make their lives easier, because oftentimes, at least at GAO, we'll have different managers reading piles of resumes. And so again, you just put yourself in their shoes and just make it very clear that you deserve to at least get to the next round of review. Okay. This goes back to the idea of thinking about yourself as a whole person candidate. Paid experience, unpaid experience, volunteer experience, travel experience. For those of you who are more recent from your PPIA JSI experience, any of your group project work. For some of you, that may have been the first time you did different projects related to statistics or economics or policy analysis. Put that on your resume. This is your chance to, again, in all the different ways that you could have gained the knowledge, skills, and abilities sought for this position. Now is the time to put it somewhere, and make sure that everything you have on your resume is relevant. So, do a gut check with yourself. For every bullet, for every position that you have on the resume, ask yourself, now, which knowledge, skill, or ability does this correspond to? What am I trying to show with this particular bullet? Because if I'm, again, looking at a couple hundred resumes, I want it to be very clear that if I'm looking and scanning this resume, I can say, oh yes, this person, has more of the knowledge, skills, and abilities than this other candidate, so this person's going to move on. And it's really helpful for you to sit and reflect on what you decide to put on the resume. So again, because this type of resume differs so much from other resumes you may have developed for other applications, give yourself time to do this. And you don't need to start this resume when the job you want to apply for gets posted. This goes back to that, do your research, look at old job postings from the agency of interest. Maybe you're applying to something that gets posted every year or seasonally. So look at those old versions of job postings to see what kinds of skills that they seek. So you could build your resume before the job even goes live. And this gives you time to sit, edit, get some feedback on it, run it by mentors or folks who would be willing to give feedback. This is again just for you a chance for you to apply it as your full self. All right. Now I want to just go in a little bit more detail about using the language from the knowledge, skills, and abilities on your resume. This table is really helpful because on the left are possible experiences or skills that may be looked for with a job. And so I'll pick one. Say the job is seeking experience with collecting data or information. So what does that mean? Especially for folks who may be earlier in their careers, what does it mean that I've done this? And so if you look on the right on this table, you could present your experience as, I've analyzed qualitative or quantitative data collected from various sources as part of a, school project or internship, or this particular type of position or job, or this particular group project, to make logical inferences and draw accurate conclusions. And this is what I mean about taking your experiences and sort of cross-checking it with the knowledge, skills, and abilities, and then producing resume language. So, an example of an experience that you had that may not seem on the surface as directly related to a job that you seek. Perhaps you helped with Get Out the Vote volunteer efforts, and you're applying to a position at GAO. And at GAO, we're really looking for, someone who has different analytical abilities, someone who is good at working with the team, someone who communicates effectively. So you can take this one experience that was a volunteer experience, and you can talk to me through your resume about how you used voter access network data to inform your voter outreach plan. You can talk about how you communicated with people with different levels of knowledge about XYZ issue to communicate and meet their needs about the questions they had as a voter. You could talk to me about how your voter outreach, you collected data about your voter outreach to inform the outreach plan for the next month or something like that. So again, you can take that an unpaid volunteer experience and really draw out the different skills that you've demonstrated through that experience on your federal resume, catered to the position that you seek. And here is an example of how on a federal resume, one thing that I see often is when I read people's job experiences on the resume, I find that I'm often reading a job description as opposed to what you bring to us as an applicant because of that experience. So in this before example, there's a description of, I was responsible for planning and executing and coordinating office training, and I served as a primary instructor for all new hires. That sounds great. That to me describes what your job entailed. But I have no idea what your impact was. I have no idea what specific actions you brought to the role, and I have no idea about the ultimate results of your actions or behavior or your skills in that position. So if you look at the after example, you'll see that there's more to help illustrate that impact. There are some numbers. There are, you're talking about how you developed different training courses for nearly 1,500 personnel. You're talking about the frequency with which you did this. You're talking about the feedback you got. You were rated as #1 instructor for how long. This tells me, okay, so you did that job description and you made a real impact. And it also tells me that, you know, you're, as the result of being an effective instructor, rated by your the people who took your trainings as #1 instructor, you're probably an effective communicator. You can explain complex information clearly. So I hope you can see the difference between that before example and that after example. That's probably the most common pitfall I see in federal resumes, is what I see is a job description as opposed to a resume that demonstrates your knowledge, skills, and abilities for a particular position. And then that final example is just another way to help quantify, you know, your productivity, for example. So there are different ways that you can enhance what you may already have on a resume, but again, just focusing on what that impact and result is. Another component of the federal application process might be a written assessment. On the slide here is an example of a written assessment prompt from GAO. And I want to put this up here because I want to help you I want to walk you through how to unpack this very long writing prompt. So when I look at this, and first of all, it's long. Second of all, I want to draw your attention to the first half of this very long sentence. Describe how the experience you gained through school, volunteer work, military service, paid employment, and other organizations. So all that right there is just saying, hey, cast a wide net for what it is that you can bring to this writing sample. Then we get to the, you know, how does your experience across that wide net of experiences demonstrate your analytical, data gathering, evaluation, and communication skills as they relate to the work described in the major duties section of this vacancy announcement. So to sort of translate this, as someone reading and assessing your response to this question, I'm telling you this, I will be asked to do the following. I will probably have a checklist of analytical skills, data gathering skills, evaluation skills, communication skills. And as I read your response, I'm going to be checking off anytime I see an example or demonstration that you have what we're asking for in this question. We're not trying to trick you. It's just not super clear and straightforward. But we always mean what we say. And by that, I mean, again, going back to those knowledge, skills, and abilities, really breaking down the writing prompt. And if you're someone who feels I have really strong quantitative skills, so I'm going to really just talk a lot about my analytical and data gathering skills and, you know, a little bit of evaluation with quantitative analysis. But if you don't include something about communication, you've technically not answered this question. And I say that because that's another common pitfall that I see with applications that come through. I'll have my grid for scoring and someone just didn't finish answering the question. Really, you know, there are going to be character limits, so use your characters wisely and have people review your writing sample, get feedback, work on it, take some time away, come back to it. Again, this all goes back to giving yourself a lot of time to really think through this. And to connect this back to the comments I made about the resume, any examples that you bring up in your written assessment, I should be able to find any of those examples in your writing assessment on your resume somewhere. It shouldn't be brand new information. So I just want to remind you of that. But yeah, really take the time to break down the writing assessment question. It's a real pity sometimes when I read really great essays and I realize they didn't finish answering the question. All right, and this is just a roundup of some tips that I've shared with you. One thing that you'd be surprised that we see often is in lieu of a writing assessment sample, someone might just put "see resume" or "explained in resume," and that's, again, very clearly not answering the question. One framework that I like to share with folks that I find really helpful in planning out and using your characters wisely and providing really clear responses in your writing assessment is something called SBIR. you may have understood this framework with different letters, but basically the S stands for situation. Briefly describe the situation to set up your example. B for behavior. What was your specific action or behavior? I stands for impact. What was an immediate impact of that action or behavior? And R, the result. What's the ultimate result that you want me to know as a potential employer for why it is they're even telling me this example in the first place? So if you think of everything in SBIR, I think it helps you just get to the point more directly. And I would caution you from filling your writing sample with tons of examples. Answer the question, like, directly and quickly, and then have one or two very clear examples. Because remember, you have your federal resume, which should have everything else that you'd ever want an employer to know. So the writing assessment is really an opportunity for you to dig a little deeper with some of those things on your resume, and also to, again, highlight how those skills demonstrate, how those experiences demonstrate the skills that they're seeking. Okay, so to round out all the materials that you need to submit a complete federal application, these are some of the required documents. And again, you're going to want to check each job posting for what the list of required documents is, but you're going to want an updated federal resume. You can actually save up to 5 different versions of federal resumes in USAJOBS. So I remember when I was going through the job application process, I looked at a lot of budgeting and finance and policy analyst positions. And so I had different versions of my federal resume. Academic transcripts. Make sure they are the official transcripts. Sometimes for internships, you can do an unofficial transcript, but give yourself time if you need to contact your registrar's office to get those transcripts sent so that you can meet any deadlines that are in the announcement. If you are looking at an internship that requires that you are a student, you need proof of enrollment. Again, that can come from the registrar's office. I think sometimes for different schools, they have you just, it's like looks like your school schedule or a confirmation of the credits that you're enrolled in. Some positions may require a cover letter or an additional writing sample. If there's not if the required documents does not include cover letter, don't submit one. GAO is one of those agencies where we don't require a cover letter. And so in fairness to the process, if you submit a cover letter, we're not going to look at it. So I don't want you to waste your time. If it's not listed as a required document, then you don't need to include it. And then if applicable, a Schedule A letter. And so this is applicable for different hiring authorities. For example, if there is eligibility for accepted service through veteran status, if you are American Indian Alaska Native, if you are a person with a disability. So that's just additional documentation for that Schedule A hiring authority. And again, I encourage you to submit any questions in the Q&A so we can either get through them as we're presenting or get to them at the end. But to make sure we cover all of our material, I'll pass it on to Cristina to talk about the later part of the process.
Yeah, so kind of just going along the theme that, Michelle and Celia have outlined, like you need to be, or at least I found, because I want to say I found because I'm not an expert by any means, I just graduated. I found it very helpful to be as precise as possible. So the most common reasons for ineligible applications often is just missing, even the tiniest part that is required in the USAJOBS posting. So as you can see, like no proof of enrollment in an accredited degree program, transcripts not uploaded. Number 3 is really important. I was actually just writing down a note to mention this. Make sure that your transcript also has all the information that you need that is detailed in the USAJOBS posting. I recall that at Rutgers, I had to request additional documentation because it didn't list either my graduation date or something really weird. So make sure you give yourself enough time and space in order to do that, because you don't want to have the anxiety of relying on a really nice human resource officer to give you some slack, because who knows if they will. And then also inaccurate responses to application questions. So here, in my experience, it really helped to ask my networks at GAO for help you know, oh, if I accidentally say no or like ponder over this question, like would it immediately take me out of the running? Often it is yes. Um, and then yeah, no narrative response. So just saying see resume. Next slide, please. So yeah, really important to monitor your application status. On USAJOBS, you can have, I was actually just on it to see my old application from GAO, and it still says like job attained, and you can still track your application, which is really cool. So as you can see in this little picture right here, it has all the like applications posted that you've applied to, and then the status in green or red. As it says on the slide, it is a long application process. So I remember I applied for my internship in December for my summer internship at GAO, and I don't think I heard back until springtime. So don't worry, it's just inherently like that. At least in my experience, it was. And then if you have questions, like don't be afraid to reach out for clarification, similar to the resume. Like this is not the time to be shy. Like you want to be in the driver's seat. And I know a lot of times, at least in my experience, and people I know, we're hesitant and we don't want to bother, but bother because, you know, it's someone's job out there to be bothered. Next slide, please. Okay, so for some interview tips, their tips are listed on the slide, but I figured to supplement them with like tips based off of my own experience, both in and outside of GAO. So, you know, the interview is really your opportunity to add color to your written application materials. So try not to recite verbatim information from your written materials, but add details or information that you feel might be best conveyed orally. Really just try to, I guess, tell a story and round out that whole person that is in your written application materials. So for, you know, be ready to elaborate on your educational or professional achievements. So here I actually created in Excel. I mean, I'm detailed oriented and you don't have to be this much, but I created an Excel so I could visually connect each KSA, knowledge, skill, and ability listed in the job posting to like potential narratives for my interview responses. And then at least I felt it was helpful to craft narratives from the GAO perspective for research projects that I worked on from start to finish so that like you could be familiar with that SBIR model. As Michelle said, it's easier to talk about impact and results if you saw something from start to finish. And then, you know, just keeping in mind the agency that you're applying for. So at GAO, research is really important. So like being able to convey like process and I guess your thought process as well is really helpful in the interview. Um, and as it says on the slide, read news articles about the agency. So in my experience, I made sure to like actively research GAO. So the mission teams, portfolios of interest to me, high priority issues to really try to not only convey like my strengths, but how I would like to use those strengths to like advance and support the agency's work. Showing foresight in that way. So like looking ahead, see how you would want to take an organization to where it wants to go is really important. And having that kind of motivation and conveying that detail orientedness in an interview really shines through. A lot of the feedback I've received across interviews is really just like, you seemed really knowledgeable and motivated. Like as vague as that. But it takes a lot of preparation to get there. Express yourself clearly. So here I really ask people in my network. So I mean, honestly, PPI alumni and Michelle specifically to help me with mock interviews. So mock interviews I cannot emphasize enough, even though you might be so tired after doing like the resume and the writing and you're like, oh, I have to prepare for an interview. They're so important because it really helps you gain a fresh perspective on like the framing of your stories and like, oh, you sound this way here, and just things that you would never know if you were like just recant responses in your head. Prepare a list of questions for your interviewers. This is really important because again, it's kind of a way for you to also show that foresight that I mentioned earlier of like it shows that you're serious and you really want to see where an organization is going and how you can best contribute, but also like, you know, you're kind of interviewing the agencies that you're applying to too to see if they're a great fit. So like, for example, I also like to ask, is there anything I haven't covered that would help support your consideration of my application? Um, that is a big help because kind of eases your anxiety on that end where it's like, oh, did I not cover anything? Do they have questions? You want to make sure that you're painting this full picture and you're leaving your interviewers and your application evaluators with like no questions. They have all the information they need, as Michelle kind of alluded to. And request to contact. So I like to send thank you emails, but that's just a preference. And then for interviewing, the Office of Personnel Management periodically hosts like really informative webinars on both applying through USAJOBS, but also interviewing for federal job opportunities. And I use that personally for GAO. And then also graduate policy programs have like publicly available resources on interviewing for federal jobs and other public sector jobs. So I use a lot of those too, just try to be sector specific because each sector has its own norms and things like that. Next slide, please. So yeah, so kind of just going to the GAO specific. So intern announcements are posted very in advance. As I said, like I just checked it this morning. I applied apparently in December for my internship. So just kind of reiterating the importance of preparing as soon as possible, especially because um, at least when I applied for my internship, GAO had a threshold of applications rather than a specific due date. And if that threshold was reached before the deadline, then the application's closed. So you kind of want to save yourself that anxiety of like, oh my gosh, I have to write all of this, but like 300 applications might be submitted before then. You can look even now and try to find like old, postings or active postings that you might not have time to apply for and prepare as much as possible. Um, we don't post full-time positions every year, depends on the federal budget. So I think I said in the Q&A, like the internship at GAO is really the pipeline to get into the full-time analyst position, but sometimes there are openings to just get directly there. And then, yeah, just use everything, USAJOBS, Handshake. I followed GAO on LinkedIn to kind of get those alerts. And the PPI Facebook was probably the most important with Michelle being like, the internship application is out. I was always looking out for Michelle's posts. So follow PPI on Facebook. Yeah, next slide, please.
I just want to elaborate a little bit on this since I know we had some questions about possible positions if you've already graduated. So all internships are currently enrolled students. If you have already graduated, the potential opportunities to enter GAO space would be through open positions as very likely an analyst in our professional development program, which all three of us have participated in that or are currently in it. So we're happy to answer questions about that. If you are someone who's mid-career and have a specialty area, we occasionally hire specialists who may bring expertise, for example, in disability policy or in national security policy. But in that case, what you'd want to do is sign up for notifications for full-time positions from GAO. And then as soon as something is posted, you'll get notified. I would encourage you to reach out to the great network of PPI alumni at GAO, because I think across the about 20 of us, we're all over the agency. So we may know of something coming up soon that has not yet been posted. So if you want to keep in touch with us. But in terms of full-time positions, as Cristina said, we don't post them every year because number one, when we do have openings for full-time positions, we first look at our former interns. And then second, it's very dependent on the federal budget. And as you may be well aware, we've been operating under CRs for the last how many years? So a lot of agencies, it's not just GAO, are very much affected by this. It's hard to operate on a flat budget and make promises and make job offers if you're not sure what your budget will be. So GAO and other federal agencies, sometimes what happens is you don't hear anything about jobs across many agencies. And then the second the CR passes, or sorry, the second Congress passes a budget, you will suddenly, USAJOBS is buzzing. And that is because agencies finally know what their budget is. And so I would keep an eye out for, how budget talks are going, because there may be nothing. And then when the budget's passed, suddenly there are a lot of things, because many agencies like GAO, we're just sitting on job announcements and waiting to put them out live. So I know in years past, when the budgets were passed on time more frequently, we did sort of have like a time estimate about when we would post jobs. It's just not really been the case these past few years. So it's hard to really tell you when exactly we might have something up, but these are all ways you can kind of stay in the loop, you know, and know about something when it's posted.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Michelle. So yeah, so here is just kind of key reminders to wrap everything up. So please sign up for an account as soon as possible and automatic job alerts, because as Celia said, like a lot of this is just front loading the work, so you're not rushing when a job announcement is post. Read the announcement very carefully. At least for GAO, the requirements are detailed pretty clearly from my perspective. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email the contact listed, because you really want to make sure that you meet all the, I guess, hardline criteria before you put that effort in, which is a lot, as we outlined in the presentation. Keep your federal resume updated. This is very important because, for example, if we do internet GAO and you get the like thing, like we want to convert you to the professional development program, you have to send, at least I had to send an updated resume. And that was not fun because I didn't keep my resume updated and I had to do it during Christmas time. So a little hard. And then, yeah, answer all parts of the assessment question, please, with targeted responses. Be very clear. Make sure your evaluators don't have any questions and they could directly connect things to the job posting. Proofread, get other input. You know, it is really hard, speaking from experience, as someone who just likes to front load work and send it off, to get 50 hands on it, but it really helps because you know, an application is also seen as like a writing sample in a kind of way, especially at a place at GAO where you write a lot. And then I also just wanted to answer the question I saw about seeing resume and you don't want to sound repetitive, and add a little bit more information to that before we wrap up. Um, at least for my application, because I had a lot of diverse experience. I did art history research, I did policy research. I used personally that opportunity to craft a narrative across experiences and hit all the like KSAs through that. So, you know, don't feel like, oh, I must talk about one experience. Like if you kind of want to show connections that are not in the resume or in the, you know, interview that you don't have time to convey, do that in the writing sample. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Did I miss any key reminders? Anything the panelists wanted to add?
I think that's really good advice about you know, how to avoid sounding repetitive, because in a resume, right, your experiences are listed block by block. And so yeah, that writing sample could be a chance for you to synthesize your experiences across the all the things on the resume. Great point.
Cool, yeah. Next slide, please. So woo, please come join us. 20 alumni at all levels of the agency. I'm DC based, and PPI network has been so amazing, meeting people in person, and also just kind of emailing people and being like, oh, can we do a 30-minute check-in chat, and just chatting about, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, like all the things that I'm sure all PPI alumni have valued very strongly. So it's very refreshing to work in a place where you can reach out to other people and get the insider tips and things like that. So here's our contact information. I want to say, Celia, I think you're permanently placing soon, because I was going to say I'm rotating.
Yeah, so I'm actually in my third and last rotation. So I placed in the fall. It's kind of crazy. I can't believe I'm already 2 years into GAO. It goes so fast. Having such a great time. But yes, this is my last rotation.
Yeah, because I was going to add too, like, at least Celia and I, we were part of the professional development program. I'm still rotating. And part of that program, you go through different teams. So, like, I'm going to another team, so I can speak about, or we could both speak about, you know, very fresh in our minds, like different teams of the agency. So, you know, reach out with any questions. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
If folks have questions about what we went over, please put that into the Q&A. But as you're thinking of those questions, I thought maybe I'd throw a few questions to you both to kind of get the conversation and discussion going. And since you did bring up the professional development program, that was going to be my first question. For folks who aren't familiar with the professional development program at GAO, we refer to it as PDP. It's a 2-year rotational program during which you rotate across 3 to 4 policy teams, we call them mission teams, at GAO, just to learn how to develop your generalist evaluation and analyst skills across different topic areas. So I was someone who, when I interned, I worked on a farm labor housing program from the US Department of Agriculture, which was very much outside of my wheelhouse. Prior to that, I had mostly education policy experience. So I was scratching my head a bit, but it was a great opportunity for me to really grasp the GAO way of doing things, and ended up being a really great intro to GAO and my time there. Across my rotations in the PDP, I rotated through the education, workforce, and income security team, looking at access to physical education in K-12 schools. I then rotated to the natural resources and environment team, where I worked on jobs looking at safety at commercial nuclear power plants, as well as the Department of Energy's budget patterns. I then rotated through the strategic issues team, where I looked at federal grants that were passed through to states and local governments, and the oversight process. I then had my final rotation with the International Affairs and Trade team, looking at the Department of State's responsiveness to congressional requests for information. So in my first 2 years at GAO, that was the range of topics that I got to work on. And this was someone who came in with an education policy background. So my question to you both is, what had you sort of dabbled in policy-wise before interning or working at GAO? And if you could give us an overview of the experiences that you've been able to have through your internships and PDP experiences. Phil, you want to go first?
Yeah, so for myself, I came into GAO with a background in international policy and education policy. So in my undergrad and grad school time, I kind of did international education policy. So I kind of melded both of those together. So when I interned, I actually rotated, well, I interned at the Homeland Security and Justice team first, and then I was looking at the capital attack job, and that was in 2022. So it's very much like a very fresh topic, very front facing. So that was very exciting topic to work on, just, as one of my first jobs. And then when I permanently placed and went to my full rotation, my first one was in healthcare, and we looked at whether COVID funding and whether the United States is basically ready for the next public health emergency. And then my second rotation was in the natural resources and environment team. And there we were looking, my team was looking at the Clean School Bus program, and if like the electric school buses that are popping up around the nation, how that program is working, if there are any challenges, and those sort of questions. And then my topic right now, I'm on the contracting and national security acquisitions team. And right now we're just looking at the VA CPAP program. So basically the sleep apnea machines, and whether how that program is working, and are veterans getting what they need, or what are the challenges with that, and how the funding is going. So I came in with an international affairs and trade background, and I've gotten to learn a lot of different things about different aspects or themes and policy areas that I'd never really focused on. And that's, for me, was one of the main reasons why I wanted to come to GAO, just because I knew I wouldn't plateau. In previous jobs that I had, I was very much so like, I could do this. I got to a point where like, I can do this job in my sleep. I'm not really learning anymore. And whereas at GAO, like, there's not only am I learning a lot, there's a culture of learning. So we're all trying to figure out, okay, what are we looking at? What are the questions that we should ask? We work collaboratively, and how can we get the best information from our congressional requesters? So, so range of topics, some related to what I was doing, but others not. But really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I came with kind of a social policy background, but more specifically, I did very niche research on like cash transfers, universal basic income type stuff, the TANF program, so cash welfare. And yeah, so I came in with that experience, and I interned at nonprofits where we were researching that wheelhouse, and I really found myself wanting the government perspective, because I did the research for grad school and research assistant positions and nonprofit, but I found myself like missing a good chunk of like how it actually works at the ground level. So I applied for an internship at GAO, and I got placed into the Homeland Security and Justice team, where I worked on a ports job actually, so completely out of my comfort zone. But I will say, like, the emphasis on professional development really shone through in that internship. My assistant director and my teammates were all just very patient with me, and made sure to emphasize that although I'm not a policy expert on ports, like really the focus is just like becoming a better evaluator of programs and policy analyst and like really strengthening those critical thinking skills. So I loved my time, and then I came back, and now I'm in my first rotation for the PAP program with the physical infrastructure team, where we're working on something a little more familiar to me. So basically the use of Federal Transit Administration funding for any use of public transportation to go to non-emergency medical appointments in disadvantaged communities. So kind of having that equity lens in a lot of jobs at JAO, you'll find incorporate that lens, or we have a lot of like affinity groups, and we call them communities of practice, where you can, request to host a session connecting any of GAO's topic areas to DIA issues. So that has been really great to me. Um, and yeah, and I'm rotating to the Defense Capabilities and Management team soon. So don't have an update on that experience, but I'm sure that ethos of, really developing as an analyst and kind of becoming more of a critical thinker will be there too. And that team also has a lot of cool DIA issues with service members and things like that. So yeah, I really just experienced or enjoyed the experience of like developing as an analyst with like-minded people who are passionate about equity and making policy better for everyone, and just learning. Like, I've learned that I'm so much more of a generalist than I actually think, because every little email that comes of like, oh, like come to this knowledge transfer session and learn about this engagement or job, I'm like, oh man, I gotta go. And I'm like, dang, my Outlook calendar is so full. Like, let me scale it back here because I have all these other things to do. Um, so yeah, it's been great.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I can relate to that, Christina, since I came with an education policy background. My mom's a teacher, and I worked in higher ed before going back to graduate school. And I am very happy with the natural resources and environment team. When I rotated through the team, I was pleasantly surprised at how drawn to the topics I became, and have really enjoyed myself. So I encourage you all to really think about, not just what job you might be applying to, but where your career trajectory might take you through that position. You both mentioned sort of kind of being pleasantly surprised at something I'm surprised I'm a generalist, and oh, I was surprised that I actually, found a connection with this topic area. Are there any other things that surprised you or that you learned about yourself that, maybe you would add to your application if you were to like do this over, or something to consider that kind of surprised you, now that you're on the other side of the application process? I'll go first, just while you're thinking. I think because I was so focused on this idea that I come from an education background, I know that GAO has an education, workforce, and income security team. I think that I unconsciously crafted my application to be an education policy person. I was sort of in the back of my mind applying to the education, workforce, and income security team, when in fact it was a generalist position. And I think, knowing what I know now, I would have actually emphasized that I am a generalist. And I say that to the audience today because you may have had, whatever experience you had up until this point. But again, going back to this idea of what could you become at that agency? What could you become through this position? Think about that too as you're applying, because, don't think you need to put on the application like what you've always been if you're actually you're seeking an opportunity to grow as a professional. A lot of us go to grad school so we can make a career shift or career change. And so that's completely, that's not uncommon, right? So we're not going to look at your resume and see, oh, you've done all these types of positions, and then once you hit grad school, you change. Well, of course. So I would encourage you to think about that. That's something maybe I would have, upon reflection, maybe like self-reflected a bit more and just realized that I was sort of crafting myself to be someone that, it's not that I wasn't that person, it's just, I actually realized that I have a lot to offer as a generalist too. And I didn't even end up on the education team, so.
Yeah, I'll, oh,
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I also want to let folks know you can go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A still. We still have ample of time to go ahead and get your questions answered. So please don't be shy and feel free to do that. I know that our panelists were already taking your Q&A, in a very skillful way and answering them while doing their presentations, but you certainly can keep asking questions in the Q&A.
Go ahead, Cristina.
yeah, I was just I feel like, I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, so not following USAJOBS principles. Um, but on the generalist point, I will say, I guess this does kind of relate to, in a weird way, I feel like I already did it, but I didn't realize the importance of doing it while I was doing it. But to scale it back to my suggestion about how I like threaded the needle between my different experiences in my application, the way I did that was basically saying, like, I'm very passionate about equity and making sure policy is great for everyone. And this is how I've shown that through my different research experiences that seem disparate, but it is all connected to me through this like goal of promoting equity. Um, that is, I have found so important to the ethos of generalists. Like we're not just saying generalists as like, oh, like because we're all curious. Like, yeah, for some people at JO that is, but I'm also just saying this because when I heard generalists when I was being recruited, I was like, oh, are they not going to care about like these DIA issues? But it's not seen as a silo at GAO. I've noticed like that is part of what a generalist means is someone who is passionate about these like values that go beyond a topic area or go beyond a policy area. So that has been really nice to know that I guess I already did it in my application and don't have to go back in time and do that again. um but yeah.
Yeah, similarly to what Cristina said, I think if I were to change how I approach my application, maybe like using like how I could not only just do my job really well, like the specific job, but more so how I could get involved in other things, how I could like plug into the actual agency and like make it, not necessarily make it better, or like just, share my skills. So maybe I would have used an example where I wasn't like not necessarily like just work related, and maybe like how I participated in X, Y, and Z and like these clubs in school and how that related as well. So they can see me as the rounded person. I think I probably would have emphasized that a little bit more. But yeah, I think and that goes to being a generalist and also goes to showing how you could also like move the agency forward as well. So, and while also showing your passion. So I think I would have done that.
Yeah, I think unlike other types of application processes, federal applications encourage you to take that really wide net approach. And when you're not really encouraged to do that so often, you realize, maybe I don't really know how to do that. So I appreciate both of your experiences, just taking the opportunity to sort of reflect on that and how that actually presents you as a candidate and future colleague. I want to get to the one question that was dropped into the Q&A before I ask you both another question. But this question is about my experience writing for the InterSci Journal, and to what extent are those thought leadership experiences common or exceptional for analysts? At GAO, we participate and have a lot of different opportunities outside of our actual program review work. And so I had an opportunity to participate in the IntoSci working group on environmental auditing. GAO is very involved with this committee. It's a committee of auditors from governments around the world, and they are focused on like environmental auditing and the implications of environmental policy on program audits. And so I wouldn't say it was it's not that every single person works on IntoSci projects, but each mission team at GAO has different, as Cristina mentioned, communities of practice or other ways to continue to learn about different issues and topics outside of your particular project. So this was an opportunity for me to do that. And through the work on that committee, there were calls for journal articles. At the time, I had been working on a body of work looking at the US government's costs of adaptation and the federal fiscal exposure to climate change. And so I had had a few experiences doing that. And the question in the committee was, the United States has done, the GAO has done different audit work related to climate change, but how can other countries do that in their work? Because in a lot of other countries, their audit work is very much on financial audits, whereas GAO were a little bit more on the forefront with program auditing. And so that's what my journal article was about. And it was great because I sort of got a chance to sit back and kind of take in the impact of a body of work as opposed to just looking at one program or one topic. And it was fun, and I got to write the article with someone from the auditing entity from the Netherlands. And so it was this really neat sort of cross-cultural experience of getting to know how they do their audit work in the Netherlands and comparing notes for what we've done. It wasn't difficult to clear through leadership because I had the opportunity because of leadership's commitment to the committee and to the international auditing community. So this particular project, there was not a lot of red tape involved. And I would say that these experiences, I think the opportunities for those types of experiences are available. Of course, it's up to folks if that's what they want to do. Do you want to do extra writing? I did, but not everyone wants to do that. But there's a really nice community across the Inspector General IG community. We have different audit forums where folks at different local, state, and federal auditors come together to talk about different auditing issues. There are international communities of auditors. So when you go into this world of program and financial auditing, there are, different opportunities where you can stretch and learn and grow beyond just your project. So when you're looking at any kind of federal opportunity, I would encourage you to ask about those types of opportunities. Like, would I be able to do something like that? Are you involved with, different audit forums, different communities of practice? Will I be able to have mentors, and will I be able to have ways to develop my skills beyond just an individual project? I'm always so proud of how many PPI alumni we have at all levels of the agency, from managing director down to intern, because it just shows that we have a consistent pipeline of talent. This relationship that GAO has had with PPIA for over 20 years now, it's not that everyone just comes in as a managing director. Folks have worked their way through the agency, and we're all there for each other to just connect and provide advice, or just casually, lean on each other for different things. But these are the types of things I hope you all look for when you are looking at federal service opportunities. Like, what kind of culture might you find at this place? If issues of equity are important to you, if you want to make sure that you're entering an agency that has a strong priority around diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, try to find other PPI alumni who might work there, or, really lean on those casual, informal networks that you might have. Because when you apply for a federal position, you're entering federal service. And, GAO is a very popular place to be. It's always ranked as one of the top places in federal government to work, and for mid-sized agencies. But when you come into the federal service, folks jump around agencies all the time. And so I would encourage you to think of it as that too. It's not just, oh, I'm going to start a job and a career at just this one position at this one agency. Think of it as you're entering federal service, and now you're in the federal, you're in the federal government, and then you can lend your skill sets across different opportunities in the federal government. I meandered a lot, but that was sort of a broad way to answer that, answer your question, and also try to extend it beyond just that journal experience. All right, so my next question to you both, unless folks want to enter more questions into the Q&A, what is the one piece of advice that you found really helpful when you went through your experience applying through USAJOBS? And if folks were to ask you, you know, for advice, what's that like elevator pitch version thing that you would like for them to take away?
So I think for myself, the best piece of advice, which happened to come actually from Michelle, because she also helped me with my application, as Cristina was alluding to as well, but was, and I know we keep saying it, but was to start early. And for me, why that's etched in my brain and it was in my experience is because like I was in my last year of grad school. There's a lot happening, a lot of people were applying for a lot of jobs. This one, like the internship started much earlier than other internships that I was applying for. Like just the timing was different. And for myself, I was like, oh, I'll just do it. I'll just do it like a month before. Like I know what I need. Like I have an idea. But when I actually went into it, I was like, okay, I'm glad I looked at this beforehand because I'm a little confused. And so in terms of how to actually use the system and actually like matching the KSAs and matching like word for like, you know, using those keywords just because it's very streamlined and not like, oh, well, some hiring manager might just interpret it. It's like, no, they are very, like, it's very, like, what is the word? Like, there's definitely a way of doing it so that folks don't deviate from. So for me, like actually starting early and making sure I had everything and making sure it was like, before my year was like got into full swing was really, really helpful. And I think I would give that same advice just because I think that really did set me up to succeed, because honestly, if I wasn't told that, I probably would have started much closer to the application because I know myself, right? And so that was really helpful, and that gave me time. So when I was like, okay, wait, I definitely need this. Oh, I could use that experience. Okay, like it gave me time to know like how to actually get what I needed to input the information in as well, like the actual like relevant information or relevant experiences, and even experiences that I thought didn't apply actually did apply, but I only knew that because I took time beforehand to see if it matched. So I got that experience, I got that advice, and I would like definitely stress that to someone who would ask me for advice on going through USAJOBS.
Yeah, before I give mine, I guess just reiterating the importance of Celia's advice, because that was a huge learning curve going straight from undergrad to grad, and then GAO is like the importance of consistent and in advance work rather than, you know, staying up until 2 a.m. for the essay and still getting the A. So yes, preparation. I guess summarize the advice in the elevator pitch. I was literally thinking elevator pitch of like, um, you know, illustrate a full picture, invest in yourself, and leverage your networks. So like on the full picture part, it relates heavily to what Michelle had to repeatedly tell me of like, no, your resume is not long enough. I promise. Like, keep going. Like, I was like, I'm at 4 pages, Michelle. This is crazy. She was like, no, you need to like make sure that again, your evaluators are not left with questions. And that was also advice I got working for admissions in undergrad. So like the admissions officers would always tell me, like, as Michelle said, got a great application, but I still was left with questions. And they're not going to reach back out to you and be like, hey, I got a question, unless it's the interview when they actually can ask you on the spot. And then the invest in yourself and leverage your networks. Like this is really a job. So like kind of related to Celia's advice, taking the time out, and I know grad school is super busy time and like you want to just like crank out the projects, but like dedicating maybe an hour each day to like preparing the application, and then you know once you submit your application you still have to do a lot of back end work, researching the organization, talking to people, making sure that that's a place you want to be at, and you know developing cool ideas that you can present at the interview of how you would advance the organization through your work and experiences. So um doing a lot of that is a lot of work, and leveraging networks and outside of the organization. So PPIA, other resources, like I told you, OPM's webinars were super helpful for me. And just grad policy programs, like they had 70-page, things on how to apply for nonprofits and public service jobs. So like it takes a long time, but you need to make sure at the end of the day, like this is your life, this is your career, like setting aside that time, and you'll still probably get the A on the paper in grad school anyway. So, making sure like you have that foresight to look ahead beyond the now is really important.
Yes, thank you. And I would build off of what both of you said and reiterate the point I made about shifting away from job description to really demonstrating your impacts and results. That's by far the most common thing, pitfall I see on applications is that, and then not fully answering a question. I want to make sure that we get to any of your remaining questions. So if folks have anything you want to add to the Q&A, or Saran, just based on your experience, if you have any questions you'd like to ask us.
Yes, I think you all talked a little bit about how your PPIA experience, sort of finding alumni at GAO and the relationship. But can you maybe share with our audience who might be thinking about, who are maybe on an undergrad side, thinking about maybe doing the Junior Summer Institute program, how your PPIA fellowship prepared you for the path that you are now on?
I can go first since my journey started a lot longer, a long time ago. Yeah, so it's hard not to be really reflective given that the summer will be my 20th year since the experience. And I think about that summer so often. I can't emphasize that enough. I am still in touch with the majority of my cohort from PPIA. I think the biggest thing I got out of that whole experience was, well, there were two things. Number one, up to that point, I was one of those students who worked sometimes 3 jobs at a time to like pay for college. And so this was the first summer I was essentially paid to think and not have to like balance a lot of other responsibilities just to, get through the summer so I can get back to my campus jobs. So it gave me the confidence I didn't have beforehand to realize, oh my goodness, I can do quantitative analysis. That econ class that scared me before in a supportive environment and put into a policy context, I really like this stuff. And it completely changed my confidence for when I came back to campus my senior year. I redid the courses I had selected. I actually took, an econ class. I took another stats class because I knew I could do it. Up until that point, I literally applied for an independent major at my college so that I could get out of the math requirement at school, which is funny to me now because I do a lot of quantitative stuff at work. But number one, it was just the benefits of being in a supportive environment with folks who, I say the phrase like-minded in like we're like-minded because we were very committed to our various communities. We were very committed to issues around equity. We were very committed to this idea of doing good things and committing ourselves to public service, whatever that might look like later down the line. But I say like-minded in quotes because the other major thing I got out of that summer is I was put together in a cohort with folks with vastly different backgrounds than mine. And I learned so much about myself, about other people's experiences, about how to work with people with different styles and perspectives because, I had that on some level in my undergraduate experience, but this was just a microcosm of these are people who actually want to go into, policy and public service. And so it's actually this cohort that I still see in my career to this day. They're some of the first people I call when I'm making a career decision or have a question about sort of balancing like my career at this stage of my life or things like that. And I just can't emphasize enough the value of community and the value of learning how to work well in teams when you have folks who are really passionate, just as passionate as you are, but want to do something in a completely different way than you do. I use that skill constantly to this day. And I'm excited for folks who are considering applying for PPIA Junior Summer Institute. I'm excited for folks who have recently completed it. I know I could not have predicted 20 years later that this would still be such a major thing in my life. It's something that I think I value even more year after year. And now I work at a place where there are, about 20 other alumni who have that shared experience at my agency. So anyway, just that's the impact it's had on me. So I will always volunteer. You need something, you can call me through, and I will say yes, because I pretty much have PPIA to thank for my current career.
Yeah, I can go next. Michelle, you hit like on so many things too that very similar to what I'm thinking. But I think the main thing that comes out, like when I think about my PPIA experience, was that it showed me that I was interested in other things. So I was like, even though I had my passion, like Michelle said, that like everybody came with a passion, like we were very like strong about it, and we shared with each other, and we taught, we had a lot of discussions in the common room, and it was a really great time like thinking about it. But it showed that like, wait, I didn't realize I was actually interested in housing. And like, because my mind is always focused on international affairs, and that's my background. I come from a family of recent immigrants. I grew up very close to the immigration system. Like I went to school for international relations. That's how I filtered my schools out. Like that was like, this is what I'm going to do. And so when I did PPIA, I was like, okay, human rights. I wanted like, like I wanted to focus on those things. But then I was talking to like folks in education, folks who were focused on housing, and just like, and one was the tax code. There's one student who was focused on the tax code, and I was like, that is so specific. But when I heard her background and why, like how it was like, why it was important, I was like, that's really interesting. And so like I realized I could do other things. Like I didn't have to pigeonhole myself. Like I could do other things while still being passionate about what I wanted to be passionate about, or what I was passionate about. And that was just very like, and also seeing how what I was passionate about kind of dovetailed with other things, like how let's say immigrants navigate the housing situation, housing in the United States. So I could see where those linkages were made. And so I see myself at GAO right now. I'm like being a generalist and be like, oh wait, I actually like things in healthcare. Like I had no idea what contracting and national security acquisitions are. I'm still learning. So I just started this, mission team. But it's like, oh, this impacts other things. Like this is not just siloed. And going to kind of harkening back to Michelle's answer to one of the students who asked about her work on IntoSci. So when I was in the natural resources and environment team as well, which was my last rotation, I asked my assistant director, I said, oh, are there any things I can plug into that are related to international relations? Like, is there like a linkage between and what NRE does and what my passion is? And she showed me to IntoSci. So I like kind of did like a little editing for like one of the slide decks that they needed. So just to keep myself plugged in, it just showed that I can do other things and still like make those linkages, even at my current, like I learned that in PPIA and I'm actually living it now, right? So like, for example, I'm on this new team that I just rotated to, and I have a little bit of GIS work that I did through another internship through my grad school. And so someone reached out to me unprovoked, not say unprovoked, but just like out of the blue and said, hey, we do this GIS work. Like, are you interested in like, plugging into this community of practice? I was like, oh, cool. So I can still see like, even though my topic and area that I'm working on may not be what I imagine myself to be in, I can still find ways to like see how things connect and like also like, move my career forward as well. So I think that I was first introduced to that in 2015 when I went to my JSI, and I was like, wow, this is something that's actually really cool. And I like being able to learn about new things as well. So that's something that I think of.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add on top of Michelle and Celia's experiences because I just am, shocked every day at how I would manage to build such strong connections and community with my cohort, even though we were the 2020 cohort. So we were virtual, and just like all this stuff was happening that summer. So it's just like so refreshing to meet people who weren't just going their day-to-day lives and who were tuned into what was happening and very passionate about their respective communities and wanted to make a difference. So that was an incredibly empowering experience. And I guess the biggest takeaway from it was that, it really showed me that like my voice matters and like the voices of PPIA people and people from our respective communities. It's very important for us to have a seat at the table. Um, and relatedly, like it helped me get over the imposter syndrome that Michelle was like describing kind of about like her classes and things like that, where I was like, wait, like I'm able to connect all these policy areas under this DIA lens based off of not only my life experiences as a woman of color, but now I'm armed with the tools of having like quantitative analysis skills and econ and race and policy analysis and just it gave me the hard skills to really value my input more than I was beforehand. So, and I've noticed that at GAO, like even when I worked on jobs that don't have like the porch job, a DIA at the forefront of the mandate or the request for the job, like I still was able to contribute viewpoints based off of everything I learned at PPA and my cohort. Um, that helped guide the job in a way that I don't think it would have went if I didn't have that seat at the table. So PPIA is super, super important. And, just like selfishly, it's really nice to be able to convene with people when things are happening in the world and you're noticing them and it seems like no one else is, to just kind of come and be in that community and get that, motivation that you need again to like keep doing the work every day and keep showing up because it's not easy. Um, so yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing about your PPI experiences. I just want to talk about something that came up in the Q&A. I think Thea Johnson is saying, yes, 2020 cohort. So I just want to make sure that we recognize that connection. I want to thank Michelle Wong for being both a panelist and moderator with us today, and as well as Celia and Cristina for joining us and sharing their experiences with us. I also want to let folks know that in 2 weeks, we're having another webinar with the White House Fellowship. So that's Thursday, March 21st from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And also the PPIA program has launched a new website. So you can go ahead and explore that at ppiaprogram.org. And then this recording will be made available on our YouTube page and will also be sent out via email. So thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar today. We'll go ahead and wrap it here. Another, great thanks to our panelists for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'll stick around just in case someone might put something in the Q&A that I need to tend to. Other than that, we are thankful that you were able to join us on your Thursday evening. We know lots of folks had some last minute changes and commitments they had to tend to. So
thanks so much for planning these, Saran.